Hi guys, this is Charlie Moss from the freelancer for Daily Dot.
Yeah.
How are you doing? Do you have a few minutes to chat?
Yeah, that's a good time.
Okay. I just want to ask you a few questions. I'm doing an article about the history of Star Wars toys and collecting toys in general, and kind of how it's changed since the original Star Wars movie came out. So, can you first just talk about Rancho Obi-Wan a little bit, kind of what that is?
Sure. Yeah, so Rancho Obi-Wan is a museum for Star Wars, kind of put together by Steve Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
And the exhibit is really his private collection on display, which is really vast. It contains everything pretty much ever made, in countries all over the world, and since the very beginning. And so Steve has put together a comprehensive collection of Star Wars collectibles. And then my relationship to that is I'm on the board for board of directors for Rancho Obi-Wan. I'm a collector myself. I also have my own Star Wars collection, and so as being a board member, help advise Steve and the other board members on future Rancho Obi-Wan.
Gotcha. Can you tell me about the Star Wars Collective archive that you run?
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's the first collecting website, a Star Wars collecting website on the internet. Started it in 1994. Basically, at a time when there weren't many websites actually at all about Star Wars anything, and so created the Star Wars collecting website. And the idea was to build something where collectors could share information about particularly extremely obscure and rare collectibles. Mm-hmm. And just kind of was the notion was like a virtual museum. And so that's kind of how it started, and it's been running ever since. And so it's just meant to just showcase the more obscure, unusual, rare type of collectibles from Star Wars.
What are some of the most unusual Star Wars collectibles you've seen over the years?
Oh, it's hard to there's so many. There are examples of just really strange bootleg ceramics that they made with just really ugly, like an ugly version of Yoda that they did on ceramic, and a Darth Vader lamp that they made years ago, to things like the Star Wars Underoos, which were kind of popular in the day, but it just they're just kind of kitschy, strange stuff like they made perfumes and cologne in Mexico for Episode 2. Made dog food in Australia for Return of the Jedi in 1983. So Star Wars branded dog food, and they had stickers bundled in the dog food bags. So yeah, there's quite a lot of really strange stuff they've done for Star Wars in addition to all the mainstream stuff.
So over the years, how have you seen specific, because the article is specifically on toy collecting, and so how have you seen toy collecting change over the years, specifically when it comes to Star Wars? Would you say, because I know that there's been toys for a long time, but from what I've read, it seems like Star Wars kind of really started the boom in that trend of collecting different kinds of toys and things like that. Is that pretty accurate, or?
The way I would say is, I guess it's definitely changed a lot over the years. So, just starting with the early days, almost nobody was collecting in a serious sense back in the late 70s when the figures first came out and all the toys came out. Kenner started producing some toys in 77, but really the action figures didn't come out until 78, and they really weren't ready with a lot of stuff until 1978. Basically, there were people like Steve Sansweet who were, at an age where they had, reasonable disposable income, many of the kids growing up obviously weren't in that position, but Steve had the foresight to this stuff. There were several others like him who were buying, packaged action figures and so on, but that was rare at that time. And then actually through the late 80s, like Star Wars toy collecting really dropped off. I mean, it got to the point where these things were discounted. I mean, the KB toy stores, they had them like the action figures discounted for like $1 each. People really didn't even have these things at toy shows. There wasn't a whole lot of interest in the stuff. It was just way overstocked, not that many fell into it. And then from the early 90s, it kind of started to change. So in the early 90s, you have kids who grew up with Star Wars now, kind of in their 20s, they have higher disposable income, and they want to go, kind of recreate that experience. So that was really the emergence of vintage Star Wars collecting. There wasn't yet a new action figure line. So from like early 90s till 95, there were no new action figures. So all there was to buy was vintage, and collectors were just very, very focused on vintage, and so the way they usually kind of found that stuff was Toy Shop magazine was the rage at the time. So there was this magazine by Krause Publications called Toy Shop, and Toy Shop was great because it had listings all over the world from dealers who had Star Wars stuff, and then it also mentioned local toy stores. Toy shows. It advertised in toy shops, so you would find out about toy shows in their area, and so that was also a popular way to kind of find stuff. So at that time, to me, that's like the heyday of kind of vintage Star Wars collecting, because it was like all there was vintage in Star Wars at the time, and you had just all these people kind of getting into it for the first time, and toy shows were really big. It was before online purchases, so then it kind of transitioned. 95 was a key point. So in like September 95, you had Hasbro issuing action figures, for the first time since the mid 80s that they had an action figure line. Actually, it was under Kenner, the name Kenner. So the Kenner toy company who had done the original figures got acquired by Hasbro. And Hasbro was issuing them under the Kenner name, which they continued to do for the next 5 years before they switched it over to Hasbro's name. And so they came out with these new action figures, and then that changed the game again, because now you had, Star Wars action figures and other toys, like the ships and so on, available in retail stores. So that marked a whole new era, and I think it created, some disruption and kind of in some sense of the identity of Star Wars collectors. So there were some that would collect the old stuff and the new stuff, some that would only buy the new stuff, some that would only buy the old stuff. So you started to kind of get differences and different niches in Star Wars collecting. That kind of started with that era. And then, it's kind of continued to this day. Now it's very rare to actually find the toys across the whole spectrum, because there's so much stuff. In fact, even the newer toys, even the toys from the last 20 years that they've been sold, very few people have been sticking with that because there's so many of those toys. So I think people start to specialize in other ways, like they go after certain ships, or they go after critters, or only for the movies. So then there are a lot of specialization that I've seen in the collecting.
So, would you say, when people, I wouldn't say I'm a collector, but I've still got most of my Star Wars toys from when I was a kid. Would you say that, are there people that just specifically collect Star Wars toys, or is it more of toy collectors, and then they have, among their collections, it's what do you see more of?
Yeah, you see more. It's more common, I think, for Star Wars collectors to specialize. I think it's more common in my experience to have Star Wars collectors who specialize in toys, rather than toy collectors that cross over to Star Wars.
Okay.
There are pockets of both. I mean, I do know people who collect lots of toy lines and also collect Star Wars. And I know lots of Star Wars toy collectors who collect lots of different kinds of Star Wars collectibles and collect the Star Wars toys. Then there are people that only collect the Star Wars toys. So all of those exist. I think the most common thing, though, I think that Star Wars is just so dominant, and then also there's so much stuff that you'll tend to get people tend to just specialize in just Star Wars. But even with that, a lot of Star Wars collectors I know, because they get into collecting and they get exposure, they might dabble in a couple other things, but by and large, most Star Wars toy collectors concentrate on the Star Wars toys and don't have like anything that's even close in terms of their mind share on other collecting.
Gotcha. Last question. So how did you get started collecting Star Wars collectibles?
Yeah, how did I get started? I began, well, I was really into it as a kid when all this stuff came out, and I saved everything I had as a kid. But I wasn't by any means like a collector. I was in the sense of the way a kid might collect, but like I had the toys on a shelf,
right,
display in my room, but I wasn't like collaborating with other collectors, and I wasn't, following secondary market kind of values of things, anything like that. So that didn't happen for me till the early 90s. And what really happened then was I got exposure to at first, well, I got nostalgic for it.
Mm-hmm.
You had the Zahn novels come out. You had Dark had released Dark Empire comics. So Star Wars was kind of coming back into the mainstream. And then another thing that was kind of a catalyst for it was, at the time I was in graduate school in the early 90s, I would walk to my office in I had vintage Star Wars figures in the window, and those are some of the figures I never had, because there were some characters stopped buying them, and then there were these other characters that I never had, and I was like, all right, I totally want to complete my set of these figures. I never did in the day. And so that got me back into it. And then I figured very early on that there had to be, communities of people who collectors, and there had to be toy shows. So I kind of very quickly figured out about Toy Shop Magazine and figured out about toy shows. And then that just got me started. And it was the toys that really got me into Star Wars collecting. And then from there I started posting ads in the paper to go buy local collections. And, I just started kind of really ramping it up. I started diversifying my interests. But it was really just nostalgia for the toys, and in the early 90s got me really back into it.
Cool. All right, I think that'll do it. I may, as I begin to write the article, I may come back to you in an email with a couple of follow-up questions. Maybe not.
Sure, that's no problem.
But
if you got other things you want.
Okay, and there's also, I don't know if you've seen this or not. There's I'm interviewing a filmmaker tomorrow who directed the movie, the documentary Plastic Galaxies. Have you heard of that?
Okay.
It's about...
Yeah, Brian Stillman?
Yeah,
Brian, I'm in his film as Steve. So,
nice, okay.
I interviewed a bunch of collectors for that, yeah.
Awesome,
so,
okay.
I know Brian, I think I saw him last week when I was in New York, so...
Nice. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So, just let me know if you need anything else. Happy to help.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Cool. All right, talk to you later.